All right, so we're diving right into the thick of it today. We're talking Duke basketball and their chances in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, March Madness is almost here, and there's a lot of anticipation, obviously, but
Especially for Duke fans this year.
especially for Duke fans. And I think a lot of that anticipation turned to concern, just the last couple of days.
Right. Duke was looking like a lock for a #1 seed in the tournament, and then all of a sudden,
Boom, injuries.
yeah, injuries hit.
It's amazing how quickly things can change in sports. One minute you're on top of the world, and the next you're facing all this uncertainty.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to unpack today. So we're pulling our insights from a podcast called Cooper Flagg's Injury and Duke's Tournament Future.
Catchy title.
Yeah, it is. And we're going to figure out how these injuries to Cooper Flagg and Maliq Brown might affect Duke's tournament seeding and what it all means for their chances.
Yeah, because let's be honest, these injuries have the potential to really shake things up. I mean, could this derail their entire March Madness run? We got to find out.
Right. And the first thing we need to understand is the immediate impact of these injuries. So the podcast tells us that Cooper Flagg, their star freshman, sprained his ankle during the ACC quarterfinals.
Against Georgia Tech.
Yeah, against Georgia Tech. And, thankfully, the x-rays were negative.
That's a good sign, at least.
It is, but Coach Scheyer called his chances of playing in the semifinals a real long shot.
Yeah, so not looking good for the ACC tournament, but what about the big dance? That's the real question here.
Exactly, and it's not just Flagg, right? The podcast also mentions that Maliq Brown is dealing with a shoulder injury.
So now you have two key players potentially out, and that has a ripple effect across the whole team. It's not just about missing their individual contributions, it changes the whole dynamic.
Right, and the podcast actually uses this really strong phrase. They say this could reshuffle Duke's entire March Madness trajectory.
Whoa, reshuffle.
That's a serious word.
It is. What do you think they mean by that? Well, think about it. A lower seed means potentially tougher matchups early in the tournament. Maybe playing against higher-ranked teams on their home courts. It makes the road to the Final Four way harder.
Oh, I see. So it's not just about whether they win or lose. It's about the path they have to take to get there.
Exactly. The path to the championship becomes way more complicated.
So let's talk about the specifics of the NCAA tournament seeding. The podcast says that Duke is currently clinging to a likely #1 seed.
Clinging. Doesn't sound too secure, does it?
It doesn't, especially with Selection Sunday just around the corner. So what are the deciding factors here?
Well, the podcast highlights the ACC semifinals. If Flagg misses that game, and if other top contenders like Houston or Michigan State win their conference tournaments.
Those teams also fighting for those top seeds?
Exactly. Duke's hold on that #1 seed could slip away.
Oh, wow. So every game from here on out is crucial.
Absolutely. And the podcast actually gives us a peek into the selection committee's thinking. Joe Lunardi, a well-known bracketologist, suggests that the committee might actually delay some seeding decisions.
Really?
Yeah, to wait for an update on Flagg's condition. Because they don't want to give a top seed to a team whose star player might be out.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, they want to be as accurate as possible with their bracket.
And Jeff Borzello, another expert, lays out a pretty clear scenario. He says if Duke loses the ACC semifinal without Flagg and other top teams win their conference tournaments.
Duke could be bumped down to a 2 seed.
A 2 seed. That's a big difference. What would that mean for their tournament path?
Well, as a 2 seed, they're more likely to face another really strong team in the Sweet 16.
And probably a #1 seed in the Elite 8.
Exactly. The margin for error gets much smaller.
It's like the difficulty level suddenly goes up a notch.
Yeah, exactly. But there's still hope for Duke to keep that top seed.
Okay, so what's the deciding factor there?
It all comes down to Flagg's availability for the NCAA tournament. The podcast says that if he's considered probable to play, even if he misses the ACC semifinals, Duke is still likely to be a #1 seed.
So probable is the key word here.
Exactly. If the committee thinks Flagg will be healthy and ready to go for the tournament, they'll probably give Duke the benefit of the doubt.
They'll look at their overall record, their performance throughout the season.
Precisely. They'll focus on what Duke has already accomplished rather than what might happen.
But that leads us to another question.
Cool.
What about the overall #1 seed? The top spot in the entire bracket.
Right.
Myron Medcalf brings up a really interesting point. He says the uncertainty about Flagg's long-term recovery could actually hurt Duke's chances of getting that overall top seed.
At first I was thinking, why would they care about long-term recovery? It's just about the tournament, right?
Right, but the podcast explains it really well.
Yeah, they get into the nitty-gritty of how the committee thinks. They're not just looking at wins and losses. They're trying to create